When my sister asked me for a favor, I didn't think twice. Of course I said yes. Lucas, my nephew, needed to spend a month here at my house, in Florianopolis, to study for the entrance exam to the military academy. No drama, right? I agreed right away, and Ricardo, my husband, was also cool with the idea. But let me tell you, when Lucas arrived, I was shocked. The boy I remembered was no more. In his place was a real man. Tall, strong, and with a way that made anyone pay attention to him without even trying. Before starting the full story, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any stories like this and the continuation of this story. When he came into our house, I immediately went to greet him with a big smile. "Wow, Lucas, you've grown so much. You're handsome and full of muscles now. I bet you must be a big hit with the girls." Logically, I joked, amused. He gave a light, somewhat shy laugh and replied that he didn't have time for such things because he was focused on training and studying. I laughed along, but something there made me pay more attention to him. It wasn't just his appearance. There was something different, an energy that made me a little restless. A few days after Lucas arrived, Ricardo had to travel. And there we were, alone in the house. I tried to act like always, like the attentive and caring aunt. But I won't lie. His presence moved me. He was so confident, so serious in the way he spoke and carried himself that it was impossible not to notice. One morning, while I was making coffee, I decided to put on a tighter dress, something that would accentuate my waist and show off my legs. It wasn't by chance. I wanted to see how he would react. And it turned out that way. When Lucas came into the kitchen, I noticed that his eyes stopped on me for longer than usual. He quickly looked away, trying to hide it, but the way he swallowed gave me everything away. On the outside, I continued to act as if nothing had happened. But on the inside... on the inside, I was feeling radiant. It was like a silent game, an exchange of glances and small gestures that only the two of us understood. And in this game, the tension seemed to increase every day. During lunch, we talked about Lucas's future. He was serious, speaking with such determination about his plans. It was inspiring, but at the same time, there was something in his eyes, something he was clearly trying to hide. I decided to bring up the subject. "Lucas, have you been going out to have fun? Any special girls?" He shook his head in an almost defensive way. "No, Auntie. I'm focused on my goal right now." I laughed softly and looked at him, full of affection. "Well, but don't forget to enjoy life. You're young, strong, handsome. I bet there's no shortage of people wanting to be by your side." He didn't answer. He just gave a smirk and went back to eating. But I saw a different glow in his eyes, as if those words had made some impact. As the days went by, I began to notice little details that I might not have noticed before. When I passed him in the hallway, I could feel his eyes following me, almost as if he wanted to say something but didn't have the courage. Sometimes he seemed nervous around me, stumbling over his words or avoiding looking at me directly. These reactions intrigued me, and I won't deny, they increased the tension in the air even more. One afternoon, while we were washing the dishes together after lunch, I decided to play with the moment. I dropped a spoon on the floor. When I bent down to pick it up, I clearly noticed that he was looking at me. When I stood up, his cheeks were flushed and he quickly looked away. I tried to hold back my laughter and asked in the most casual voice possible, "Is everything okay, Lucas?" He swallowed hard, trying to maintain his composure. "Yeah, I was just thinking about training." The answer was quick, but his eyes told another story. I smiled slightly and continued what I was doing, but deep down, I knew he was trying to hide something. That night, I lay in bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept reliving every moment, every exchange of glances, every gesture that seemed to carry something more. It wasn't just curiosity that I felt. It was intense, almost palpable. I closed my eyes and found myself imagining. What if we took this tension further? What if all of this was more than just random moments? A smile escaped my lips. Maybe it was dangerous. Maybe it was even a little crazy. But it was impossible not to think about it. That thought made me warm inside, a mix of fear and excitement. In the silence of the night, I realized that something was changing. Not just around me, but inside me. The next morning, I chose a light dress, the kind that moves with your body, effortlessly highlighting your details. When I left the room, Lucas was in the living room, distracted, watching television. But as soon as I walked past him, I felt his eyes following me. I stopped at the kitchen door and, almost as if by reflex, looked back. I caught him red-handed. He looked away in an instant, but the blush on his face gave it all away. It was impossible to hold back a smile. With Ricardo away for a few more days, the house seemed quieter. And that silence made every moment between Lucas and me even more charged. A simple exchange of glances or an unpretentious gesture seemed full of meaning. It was as if the air between us was thicker, more electric. One night, already ready for bed, something inside me decided to test the limits. I walked to Lucas's room and knocked lightly on the door. The answer came in a hoarse, sleepy voice. "Come in." I slowly pushed the door open and found him lying on the bed, but clearly awake. He looked at me with a mixture of surprise and curiosity as I approached. "I couldn't sleep," I confessed, in a calm, almost intimate tone. "You've been so quiet. Is everything okay?" He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yes, Auntie. I'm just a little overwhelmed. Sometimes I feel like going out, distracting myself, but I need to stay focused on my studies." I sat on the edge of the bed and, with a gentle gesture, placed my hand over his. The touch was brief, but intentional. "I understand," I said, looking straight into his eyes. When we're alone, feelings can seem more intense, harder to ignore. But you don't have to carry everything alone. It'll be okay. Lucas looked at me as if he was searching for something in my words. Comfort, perhaps, or even permission to feel what he was feeling. There was relief in his eyes, but also something deeper, something he couldn't hide. Before leaving, I touched his arm lightly and whispered, "Good night, darling. Have sweet dreams." When I returned to my room, my heart was racing. It wasn't just because of the conversation. It was because of everything that moment held. An uneasiness took hold of me, mixed with an excitement that was hard to ignore. The tension between us was growing every day, like a taut rope, ready to snap. The following days were a silent game of teasing and anticipation. I tested the limits in subtle ways. A longer look, a mischievous smile, gestures that spoke more than any words. And Lucas? He responded, albeit hesitantly. Every time our eyes met, it seemed like the world stopped for a moment. Still, there was a limit that neither of us was ready to cross, at least not yet. Ricardo would be back soon, and that reality loomed over us as a reminder that we needed to be careful. But at the same time, I didn't want that feeling to end. It was dangerous, yes, but also irresistible, so the days passed like a game of chess where every move, every word was calculated. I tried to act naturally, but it was hard to ignore the growing energy between us. Lucas, on the other hand, was increasingly disconcerted. He tried to maintain a serious posture, but his eyes betrayed him. Whenever I approached, I felt that gaze filled with something that he tried, without much success, to hide. On a particularly hot afternoon, I decided to enjoy the garden. I put on a short, light dress and went out to water the plants. Lucas was training in the backyard, shirtless, his body glistening with sweat. It was impossible not to notice the transformation. He seemed so focused, so intense. When he saw me, he stopped for a moment, drying his face with a towel. "It's hot today, isn't it?" I commented, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out softer than I expected. Yes, he replied with a slight smile. Good for training. Or for relaxing, I teased, winking at him before returning my attention to the plants. Over my shoulder, I could see that he was still watching me, unmoving. He didn't say anything, but the tension was there, clear as day. When I finished, I walked past him again, and this time I let my hand lightly touch his arm. You're doing well. I can see how hard you're working, I said before walking into the house. The touch was brief, but enough to make his heart race. That night, after dinner, Lucas offered to wash the dishes while I put them away. The atmosphere between us was almost palpable. It was as if every movement had a hidden meaning. Every word carried more than just what was said. Thank you for having me here, Auntie. Really? He said suddenly, breaking the silence. Of course, Lucas. It's a pleasure to have you here, I replied, looking directly at him. There was a moment of silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was intense. Our eyes met, and for a moment it felt like time had stopped. He quickly lowered his gaze, but I saw the blush return to his cheeks. It was impossible not to notice the conflict within him, and perhaps within me as well. Later, lying in bed, I thought about that look, about his hesitation. It was as if we were walking a fine line, a boundary between what was allowed and what was not. And, as much as reason screamed for us to keep our distance, there was something stronger, more primal, pulling us towards each other. The next day, I decided to go shopping and asked if Lucas would like to accompany me. He immediately agreed, and on the way to the market, the conversation was light but full of subtext. We talked about trivial things, the military academy, his future, but there was a new closeness, as if we were connected by something we didn't even need to verbalize. In the parking lot, as we were putting the groceries in the car, our hands touched by chance. It was a simple gesture, but full of meaning. He looked at me and opened his mouth as if he were going to say something, but decided against it. I smiled, trying to lighten the moment. You don't have to be so serious, Lucas. Sometimes it's good to just let things happen. The drive back home was silent, but full of anticipation. I knew we were getting closer to something neither of us could control, and the question that hung in the air was, how far were we willing to go? Do you think I'm doing something wrong? Leave your comment below to let me know, and if you also want to know the continuation of this story, comment here part 2. If you liked this story, click like, and if you want to know more delicious stories like this, click on the video that is on the screen.